Hello everyone and welcome back to the Dungeon Learner's Guide. Today we've got another of our daily Pride Month decks. This is deck number 23 and it's titled LGBTQ plus households, as a shout out to everyone who maybe grew up with two moms, two dads, or any combination of the two. So, to that end, if you've missed the first few episodes, or 22 episodes I suppose, what we're doing today is building a commander deck for Magic the Gathering using two non-partner commanders, working with a budget of $100 or less and using this as a way to celebrate the diversity of the LGBTQ plus community every day for all of June. So today, our two commanders are two mothers in Magic. We have Sakiko, Mother of Summer, and the Goose Mother. So Sakiko is 4 green for a legendary creature snake shaman, so 3/3. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, add that much green mana, and until end of turn, you don't lose that mana as steps and phases end. Then the Goose Mother is X green-blue for a 2/2 legendary creature bird hydra. It's got flying, it enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters. When it enters the battlefield, you make half X food tokens rounded up. And whenever it attacks, you may sacrifice a food. If you do, draw a card. So we have Sakiko to make us a ton of mana, and we have the Goose Mother to hopefully draw some cards and gain some life. So to that end, let's take a look at some of our themes of this deck and try to figure out what exactly we're trying to do. First up, we have, of course, food tokens. We are really heavily focused on the food tokens that the Goose Mother makes, because with Sakiko we can use them to our advantage because we're going to have a ton of mana to use. So a good example of what we're trying to do with them is Eleanor Gardener, which is 3 and a green for a 2/4 legendary creature halfling scout. When Eleanor enters the battlefield, create a food token, and at the beginning of your end step, if you sacrificed a food this turn, you may search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So this is a great way to ramp while just kind of continuing our game plan as normal, and it's a great payoff for having and sacrificing a bunch of food tokens. Moving on to our second theme of the deck, this one is of course artifacts. Now it's a little bit odd to play an artifact-centered deck in Simic, but there's actually a surprising amount of payoffs for artifacts in green and blue, and a good example of that is Teething Wormlet, which is 1 green for a 1/1 worm. It has Death Touch if you control 3 or more artifacts, very easy to do in this deck. And whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life, and if it's the first time this ability has resolved this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Teething Wormlet. So this is a great way to gain a ton of life without having to sacrifice our food tokens, which is always nice, and it gives us a giant attacker/blocker late in the game, because we can pretty much put a counter on this every single turn for the entire game. So this is a great way to do a couple of different things, and at the very top of that list, it does get Death Touch if we have a ton of artifacts, making it one of the best blockers on the board, and it puts our opponents in a position where they kind of have to spend premium removal to kill our 1-drop, which is always a feel-bad situation. Moving on though, to our final theme of the deck, this one is going to be X spells. So a good example of what I mean when I say X spells is of course the Goose Mother, but also Capricopian, which is X and a green for a 0/0 goat hydra. It enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. Then you can pay 2 and put a +1/+1 counter on Capricopian. Then you may reselect which player Capricopian is attacking, but only the player that Capricopian is attacking may activate this ability, and only during the declare attacker's step. So it's a lot of words, but basically if we spend 2 mana to put a Capricopian into play, we get a 1/1 goat hydra. Then we can attack someone and they can spend 2 mana to put a +1/+1 counter on Capricopian and then send it to attack another player. But the main reason we want to have some X spells is because Sakiko is going to allow us to generate a ton of mana, and it's a great way for us to pump that mana into something that's relevant to the game, making a giant goat hydra that nobody wants to be attacking them, so they're probably going to put more counters on it and redirect the attacks more often than not. Anyway though, that brings us to the end of our themes for today, and the next thing we're going to do is take a look at some key cards in the deck, and these are cards that really synergize with what we're trying to do, and in a lot of cases are value pieces or win conditions, but they're usually kind of like the MVPs of the deck. So starting off with our first key card, we have Forensic Gadgeteer, which is 2 and a blue for a 2/3 Vidalcan Artificer Detective. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, investigate. I will be honest, we do not have a ton of artifact spells in here. We have a lot of stuff that make artifact tokens, but not necessarily spells. So why is this a key card? And it's the second ability that says activated abilities of artifacts you control cost 1 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana in that cost to less than 1 mana. This basically means that now all of our food tokens can be sacrificed for just 1 mana instead of 2. And that is incredibly powerful because it basically lets us sacrifice double the amount of food tokens in 1 turn that we would be able to otherwise, put ourselves in a situation where we've gained a ton of life, and hopefully outrace our opponents and their damage outputs. Next though, moving on to our second key card, we have Rise and Shine. One of the best win conditions in the deck for our food tokens. It is 1 and a blue for a sorcery. Target non-creature artifact you control becomes a 0/0 artifact creature. Put 4 +1/+1 counters on each artifact that became a creature this way. But more importantly, it also has Overload for 4 blue. This basically lets us turn every single artifact we control into a 4/4 creature, which means that if we have, say, 10 food tokens in play, we all of a sudden go from 0 power to 40, and we can start knocking out opponents very, very quickly and very efficiently. That, though, is not the only win condition in the deck, because we also have keycard number 3, which is Karn Legacy Reforged. And Karn is 5 mana for a star legendary artifact creature golem. Its power and toughness are each equal to the greatest mana value among artifacts you control. So since Karn himself is an artifact, he is a minimum 5/5. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you add a colorless mana for each artifact you control. This mana can't be spent to cast non-artifact spells, and until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. This is incredibly powerful when combined with our food tokens because it doesn't specify non-token artifacts. So we can make, say, 10 colorless mana if we have 10 food tokens, and then we just can't use that mana to cast non-artifact spells. But we still can use that mana to activate abilities. So we can actually use that mana to sacrifice our food tokens, and if we have something like Forensic Gadgeteer in play, we can actually make 10 mana for our 10 foods, and then each of them sacrifices for 1 mana, meaning basically for free, we can just sacrifice all of our foods, trigger all of our synergies, gain a ton of life, and put ourselves in a position where we've really outvalued the rest of the table. That, though, is the end of our key cards for today. So the next thing we're going to do is take a look at some cool interactions in the deck, and these are cards that really synergize well with each other, and in a lot of cases are just kind of fun cards that I would want to highlight. So the first pair of cards I want to talk about is going to be Academy Manufactor and Transmutation Font. Academy Manufactor, kind of a staple for food or junk style decks. 3 mana for a 1/3 artifact creature assembly worker. If you would create a clue, food, or treasure token, instead create 1 of each. So for every food we are making, we're also getting clues, which can draw us cards, and we're getting treasures, which can make us mana. That alone probably makes Academy Manufactor one of the best cards in the deck, but when combined with Transmutation Font, it's even stronger, because Transmutation Font is 5 mana for an artifact that can tap to create your choice of a blood token, clue token, or a food token. Then you can pay 3 and tap it and sacrifice 3 artifact tokens with different names, search your library for an artifact card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle, activate only as a sorcery. Now, like I said earlier, we don't have a ton of artifacts in the deck, but the ones that we do have are very powerful and can really win us the game if we get them into play. So being able to generate just a single food token, which we can do by tapping the font if we want to, with Academy Manufactor that turns into a food, clue, and treasure, which are 3 artifact tokens with different names, we can then activate the Transmutation Font to sacrifice them, search our library for an artifact, and just put it directly into play. So while we are heavily focused on food tokens, we do have other ways in the deck to make clue tokens and treasure tokens. The Transmutation Font can also make blood tokens, so there are other ways to do this without the Academy Manufactor, but that is definitely the most quick and easy way to do it. Moving on though, to our second cool interaction. This one is between Mechanized Production and Kappa Cannoneer. So Mechanized Production, 2 blue for an enchantment aura, enchant artifact you control. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of enchanted artifact. Then, if you control 8 or more artifacts with the same name as one another, you win the game. And one of the best artifacts for us to put this on is Kappa Cannoneer, which is 5 and a blue for a 4/4 artifact creature turtle warrior. It has Improvise, so we can tap our artifacts to cast it. It has Ward 4, which is very important if we're putting an aura on it. And whenever it or another artifact enters the battlefield under our control, we put a +1/+1 counter on Kappa Cannoneer, and it can't be blocked this turn. Notably, it does put a counter on itself when it enters, so it does technically enter as a 5/5. But if we're making a Kappa Cannoneer every single upkeep, we can trigger this every single turn, guaranteed, have basically an army of unblockable turtles that can just start smacking into our opponents that keep getting bigger and bigger, and there's not much our opponents can do about it because they have Ward 4. The other thing to mention about Mechanized Production is that the ability to win the game only cares if we control 8 or more artifacts with the same name. It does not have to be the artifact that is enchanted by Mechanized Production. So by putting it on a big threat like Kappa Cannoneer, we may be able to trick our opponents into thinking that they need to deal with the Kappas, when in fact, we can just make 8 food tokens, and then at the beginning of our upkeep, we just win the game, even though it's not enchanting a food token. So it's kind of a sneaky way to win, but it's definitely a very powerful win condition and a great backup to our just beat face plan. That, though, brings us to the end of our cool interactions for today. So finally, we're going to take a look at the total deck price, which was $66.72, and our most expensive card today was Cyberdrive Awakener at a massive $12.75, and it's pretty much worth it because Cyberdrive Awakener, 5 and a blue for a 4/4 artifact creature construct, it has flying. Other artifact creatures you control have flying, and when it enters the battlefield until the end of turn, each non-creature artifact you control becomes an artifact creature with base power and toughness 4/4. So just like Rise and Shine, this turns all of our foods into 4/4 creatures, but unlike Rise and Shine, Cyberdrive Awakener gives them all flying. It also doesn't permanently turn them into creatures, it does revert them back to non-creatures at the end of turn, which is both good and bad. It means they don't die to board wipes, but it means we can't keep reusing them to attack people, so a little bit hit or miss. Anyway though, that is the end of our deck tech for today. So thank you all so much for watching. Thank you to all of the support that you've given to this channel. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would like this video and subscribe to the channel. We're so close to 2,000 subscribers. That is my goal by the end of the month. So if you can help us get there, I would love that support. Otherwise, if you want to go a little bit above and beyond, you can also find us over on Patreon and right here on YouTube as a channel member. So a huge shout out to all of our current patrons and channel members. And as always, I hope you all have a wonderful Pride Month, and I will see you on the other side of the Dungeon Learner's Guide.